They're partially talking about that. I'm gonna pick you up when I'm in the car.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Torah Chaim in this Pesach Lunch and Learn edition. So it's great to see people in the room. I'll tell you why, because usually when I teach something like this class every Thursday at noon, but it's just me and the camera. So this is kind of a different experience. I mean, it reminds me to the beginnings of Torah Chaim, what it used to be with people in the room. Then, of course, COVID happened, and we have to evolve. And then we made this incredible international audience. So we were trying to figure out a way to bring it back in person. So maybe this will give me an idea how it may work if we want to do it in a format like this in the future, to have people in the room. Number one thing that I learned, food. Number two that I learned, good food.
Yeah.
Because before we tried to do this kind of hybrid format with people in the room, some people there at home, we did it at the campus. And food was coming from? Oh. You said it. So anyway, it's not this kind of food, right? If you go to schmoozers.
You don't have your piano. You don't have your piano here.
You want music?
Well, sometimes you play piano.
Sometimes I play piano.
Music.
Yes, sometimes I play piano. So welcome everyone at home. Oh, even my
Your
wife
wife
is
is
here.
saying hi.
Yeah. I told her I'm going to work, so she wanted to be sure that I am actually here. Yes, I am. So we are going to begin with the class, which is about the counting of the Omer. Counting of the Omer is something that most people don't pay attention. It's like a minor thing in Judaism, but it shouldn't be. It's one of the most important part of the process between Pesach and Shavuot. And we are going to see why counting of the Omer is so important. Okay? And I would say it's extremely important. And I will give you just a quick preview. Okay? So you can understand where this is going. What do we celebrate in Pesach?
Freedom.
Freedom. Very good. That's the most important thing, is freedom. 50 days later, we celebrate Shavuot, which is the commandments, which means the law.
Yeah.
Okay? And this is something that every society in history learned one way or another. Freedom without a law is a formula for disaster.
Absolutely.
Okay? You need the law. So you can realize just by that Pesach alone is incomplete. And yet we make a big deal about Pesach, but it's incomplete. We need the law to frame that freedom so the freedom will make sense. Okay? That is Shavuot. But we have this 7 weeks in between Pesach and Shavuot, and the rabbi said that those 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot should be a preparation. So we can transition from freedom to law. Because it's not something that happens overnight. And this is something that if you're not prepared for it, it doesn't go well. Let me give you a few examples of situations where people are not ready for freedom. I've seen kids that they are so excited to leave the house, to be independent, right? Until they are independent, and they are not prepared for that. You have all these rules, right? That they feel that if they're independent, they won't have any rules. In the house, they have lots of rules. But then you have rules everywhere you go, right? You're going to have a roommate. You're going to have rules in the building. And you're going to have, it's so you have to be prepared. So the period between Pesach and Shavuot should be a period of preparation. Let's bring it back to Judaism. In the Jewish world, the law is the Torah. And even for that, we have to be prepared to receive the Torah. Because only if you're prepared to receive the Torah can take you to the next level. If you pretend that the Torah will make you a better person, you're wrong. The Torah won't make you a better person unless you are prepared for that. It's very interesting because this is a discussion that I have multiple times. The Torah is there to make us better, yes, but only if you prepare yourself for that. All the way. If you want to study Torah, what do you need?
Propaganda.
Understanding, reading.
You need a basic understanding to begin with. If you want to study it in the original, you need to know Hebrew. and so many other things. But at the same time, if when you study Torah, you want to become a religious person,
Faith-filled.
but by the show of hands, how many people here in the room know religious people that they are bad persons?
Got a giant orange one to stay south of us.
And how is that possible, right? And we know, all the way from rabbis, pastors, priests, imams, that they're religious and they're terrible people. How is that possible? Didn't they study their holy book?
Yeah, but it's called sin.
But you see, my point is, being an expert in a holy book is not a guarantee that you're going to be a good person. Because to me, these are people who embark themselves into studying their holy book, call it Torah, Quran, Gospels, you name it. They embark into that process without any preparation. And I will say it like this. If you don't take time to purify your heart before you study a holy book, okay, you're going to use that holy book to justify your evil.
That's true.
Let me put it that way,
Ego.
as a summary of what we are going to study today. So let me repeat it. If you don't purify your heart before you study a holy book, you're going to use that holy book to justify your evil. And it happens in every religion. That you will see religious people that they will justify evil quoting the holy book. And why is that happening? Because they never had a process of preparing themselves to receive that law. So let's see what is the Jewish formula for that. Okay? Let me go here. So you have a guide. Otherwise, alternatively, you have it also on TV, but it's exactly the same. Okay? So we were talking about the Omer specifically. In the Jewish world, between Pesach and Shavuot, we count every day. Okay? There is an app for that. Yes, sir. Which one do you use?
Chabad one. The one from Chabad. What's it called? It's the.
Oh, I used to use that up to last year. I got a better one.
You got a better one.
Mine is called My Omer.
Ooh, my Omer.
It's more reliable.
This is County Omer.
It notifies me every night when it's time to come, but it's very reliable. That one wasn't so reliable. Anyway, so the commandment to do that is coming from the Torah. I will read it. God spoke to Moses saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come to the land that I'm giving you and reap your harvest, you shall bring the Omer of the first of your harvest to the Kohen." Kohen is the priest. "He shall wave the Omer before God to be an appeasement for you. On the day following the Shabbat, the Kohen shall wave it." Few things that we learn from here is the Omer. What is the Omer?
A handful.
Yeah, I put it there, right?
Yeah.
It's a handful. There were so many different theories of how much is the Omer that I just put a couple there, but it's not even clear because we don't use the Omer anymore. It used to be a unit of measurement, the Omer, for volume. Okay? Some people think that the Omer was, let's say that you have a sack full of grain, you do this, that's an Omer. But then it depends on the size of your hand.
Yeah.
Right? So back in the day, the measurements were relative. So if you go to the shuk to the market, right? If you give me an Omer of something, it depends on who is doing it. If a person with a small hand, you will have just a little bit of.
You get your 12-year-old son to do it.
Yeah, but then the measurement was one. For example, they would say, this is a measurement that is for amounts of food. Have you ever heard kezait?
Yeah,
What is kezait?
like an olive.
Like an olive.
No,
So, for example, in Yom Kippur, if by any reason you ate something by mistake up to kezait, you're still fasting.
Oh,
And it's an advice if you're pregnant or nursing and you can't make the whole fast. They have a procedure that you eat just kazayit a little at a time.
Kezait, but we don't know how much is kezait. I mean, it was an olive at biblical times. Was it bigger? Was it smaller? The other one is kebeitza, like an egg, and that is for Pesach. The minimum amount of wine you should have for every one of the fourth cup, kebeitza. So you need to go and research how big were the eggs in biblical times to know how much volume you're talking about, but so forth. So the Omer is kind of like that. We don't really know how much is an Omer. Handful, yeah, but whose hand, right?
whose hand, yeah.
But we know that at the beginning of the harvest, right, you need to take the Omer of your grain and bring it to the priest. And the priest will take it and go like this, right? Like an offering. Now, it said, what is the first grain that you harvest in the land of Israel in the season?
Barley?
Sorry?
Barley?
Barley. Yes. Barley is the first, wheat is the last. Takes longer to be ready to be harvested. And I double checked this with farmers from Israel. And it's still like that. The first one is the barley. Okay? So you have to get the first barley, bring it to the temple, and that is the Omer offering that you have. And then he said you have to do that, bring the Omer the day after the Shabbat. What is that?
Sunday.
Which Shabbat?
That's what?
Of what? It's not so easy. Now, it's interesting that word Shabbat there started a big controversy within Judaism. There was a group of people led by the rabbis that say that in that context, Shabbat means Passover,
Okay.
the first day of Passover. Because Shabbat there is understood as day of rest. So what is the festivals are also days of rest. So it is Shabbat is Passover. There were other groups led by the priests that they said, no, that's Shabbat. It's Shabbat. It's the first Shabbat after Passover. So, long story short, the rabbis will always start the counting of the Omer following the first day of Passover. Okay? Those who follow the tradition of the priest will always start it on a Sunday. Okay? And you don't know, it's the date in the calendar is relative for the priest because it's always on a Sunday. But what's the date of that Sunday? We don't know. We don't know. So the rabbis, my understanding is they decided to take that Shabbat as Pesach so they can calculate Shavuot on an exact date. The rabbis favored knowing the exact date over saying it's on a Sunday, but you cannot calculate in advance without. Now we can because we have sophisticated calendars, but not back then. Okay, so basically it's called the count of the Omer because you're opening the counting by bringing the Omer. It's not that you have to bring an Omer every day for 50 days. And we are going to see the verse saying that you have to do it for 7 weeks a little later. Okay, but for now you know that this is the mitzvah that you have to bring the Omer. And that will start the cycle. Now, let's see. Let's continue. Now,
So
this is,
is it on the, like, okay, this one, every year, so it's always on the second day of Passover, or is it always on a Sunday?
no, the way we do it now, we follow that. Every year we start counting at the end of the second day. No, sorry, at the end of the first day, when we start the second day.
So Sunday was day one of counting the Omer this year.
So Sunday as day one was the theory of the priests, but that was not followed. Eventually in the 8th century, there was a sect within Judaism called the Karaites, that they rejected the Talmud and the authority of the rabbis, that they brought back that theory. Funny thing, you can Google it, Karaite Jews, they still exist and growing. So we do have a group within Judaism, because they are recognized as Jews, that they start the counting of the Omer on a Sunday. So they never celebrate Shavuot at the same time that we do.
No, but this year, but
is
this
on
year,
Sunday because it's a.
Oh yeah, so with this
That's
year,
right,
by
this year.
coincidence, we are going to celebrate at the same time Karaites. Do you know how they call us? Rabbanites.
Oh,
For them, we are Rabbanites. It's true. What we call Judaism is not called Judaism. How is it called?
Rabbinic Judaism.
Sorry?
It's Rabbinic Judaism.
Rabbinic Judaism. Yeah, that's a real name, because back in the day, you have Rabbinic Judaism and Scriptural Judaism. The Scripturalists, or Karaites, they rejected the existence of the rabbis, because they would say, show me in the Torah where it says that they are rabbis.
Are they the ones that don't celebrate Hanukkah because it's not in the Torah?
No, but they do accept, the Karaites do accept things that they are in the rest of the Bible,
in the Tanakh, yeah,
in the Tanakh. But yes, they don't have Hanukkah because Hanukkah is the book.
it's not in the Tanakh.
It was not canonized, the book of the Maccabees. So if the book of the Maccabees were canonized, they will celebrate Hanukkah as well. But yeah, that's the
So
reason.
they don't celebrate.
Yeah, and they have certain things that they are different from us. For example, they don't have a mezuzah in the door. Why? Because they understand that the commandment of the mezuzah is a metaphor. And how do we know that the commandment of the mezuzah is a physical box? Because we accept the oral law. And we learn that we need to physically put something in the door because it came to us through oral law, which they reject,
So
but
the
we
Karaites,
accept.
so they also reject the milk and meat.
Correct. They have a cheeseburger.
They have a cheeseburger. Or
Now
salami,
everybody's Googling
Pepper.
Karaites now.
pepperoni on their pizza.
Okay, let's go back to the class. Before any newly grown grains, wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt may be eaten, the Omer of barley flour must be offered in the temple on the second day of Pesach. This offering of barley flour is known as the Omer offering. The Omer is usually defined as a handful, which is about, this is for rabbinic purposes, when rabbis calculate things, 1 US cup or 236 grams. This is exact amount needed to produce bread from one day from one healthy adult. Okay, so more or less. Let's continue. Now, why we do that? Why the offering at the beginning? We are not even talking about the counting now. We are trying to understand why we need to bring the Omer. Because the Torah doesn't give the reasoning for the commandment. Why? Well, let's see what Rabbi Hezekiah ben Manoach, also known as Hizkuni, says. He said, it will not be appropriate to eat from the new harvest without bringing a portion of it as a gift of thanks to God, which is very interesting because most people usually will bring a gift of thanks after the fact. This is the beginning of the harvest. Is it going to be a good harvest? Is it going to be a bad harvest? We don't know. But then, almost like by faith, they bring the thank you offering at the beginning. Okay? And this is a very powerful theological concept that is embedded in Judaism, that is to say thank you in advance. So, for example, when you approach God in prayer, most people will say, please God, right? Please God, I need this. Please God, I need that. Or I want that. Sometimes we ask for what we want, not what we need. But that's a different topic. Okay? Please God, give me what I need. Please, 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 please. What the Omer is teaching us is maybe we are approaching it wrong. Instead of please God, give me this, you said, thank you God, because I know that my answer is coming.
according to your will.
So
His will.
so it's
Yeah.
it's at the end of the day it's the same, but it's a different way of approaching it. Not please, but thank you in advance for what you are going to do
No
for
matter
me.
what.
So thank you, God, in advance. This is my Omer, this is my offering, because of the harvest that is about to come. Okay? Whatever it is, but we thank you in advance.
So the grain really wouldn't be ripe then?
Sorry?
The grain wouldn't be ripe, or would it be ready, like ripe?
Well, that is the beginning, because my understanding is not all the grain gets ready at the same time.
No.
So this is the very first harvest of barley.
Okay.
But it's not much. Not
Yeah.
much. It's just a little token of our gratitude to God. And this is something that we are going to see in many of the writings from the rabbis analyzing this, that is a token of our gratitude to God in advance
Trust.
in trust for what we are
In
about to
trust.
receive.
Trust is involved.
Okay? Because remember, this is, and I will go back here. How can I do this? Here, it is for wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt. Okay, eventually all those things will be ready for harvest. So we bring a little bit of the first thing in advance, and we thank God for wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt. Okay? Let's continue. Now,
There, see?
again, it's all about gratitude, the beginning of the Omer. All about gratitude. Listen to this. In order that a person should not, God forbid, think, my hand and the strength of my hands, right? Should not think, I plowed and planted and now I am harvesting. I am the one who produced the grain.
Yeah.
Therefore, the Torah teaches him that he did not do it with his own strength. Rather, God gave him the sustenance, and everything comes from him, from God. By the way, I know that in this day and age we don't do him, that. I'm just leaving it the way this rabbi wrote it. Okay, I don't want to mess up with Rabbi Friedlander's words. That's the way he wrote it, not the way I wrote it. Therefore, the Torah teaches him that he did not do it in his own strength. Rather, God gave him the sustenance, and everything comes from him, capital H. Now, in this, how is this lesson taught? Through the fact that we give God the first and most precious portion of the grain. We thus admit that everything comes from God. When we connect the first portion to God, the first portion reflects on all the portions, and everything becomes sanctified.
That's it.
It's like the very first belongs to God as a symbol that everything belongs to God. Right? We usually, human instinct is all the opposite. We want the first for us. And then the rest, we may give it away.
Yeah.
But the first is for us. I work for it, so I want the first. Well, but it's not really the best. Doesn't matter. It's the first thing. I work so hard that I want to keep the first for me. It's like many people keep the first many things that they got with the first money. I know people that they kept the first pair of sunglasses that they got, that they were able to pay for it. So they probably cheap, but doesn't matter. It was the fruit of my work, so I keep it. And many other things. But in this case, the first is dedicated to God. It's just to teach us something, that where is everything coming from. Any comments?
Does the priest burn it? Or what does the priest do with the Omer?
The priest?
Yeah.
I can. That's a good question. I think
Passover,
it may be offered to the fire, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
He won't bake it.
Okay.
No, he won't bake it.
Okay, and he wouldn't eat it because it's
No.
basically this is all the stuff you're not supposed to eat.
Yeah, the priest, they received other gifts specific. There were other sacrifices that you have to give a portion to the priest,
Yeah.
not this one. There were others that the priest had it very easy. It doesn't matter if it was a good year or bad year, the priest, they were doing fine. Because every time that you will bring a sacrifice, an animal sacrifice, there was a portion of the meat that the priest will keep. And there were other things that even money gifts that you have to bring to the temple, that you have to choose any priest you wanted and you have to give it to him. It's and it looks like it was the same in all the Middle East. Remember the story when it was a famine and Joseph was in Egypt. Remember the Pharaoh.
Cats.
He has the dream of the 7 good years and the 7 bad years. And then
Did that, the cats.
and Joseph said, well, you have to save for 7 years so you will have enough grain for the bad years. And the Torah says that when the bad years started, everybody came to Egypt to buy grain. Eventually, humanity ran out of money to pay for the grain. So Pharaoh was taking the land titles as payment. So Pharaoh became the owner of the whole area without shooting an arrow, just by the genius of Joseph. And said that everybody had to sell their properties to Pharaoh, with one exception: the priests. Because even in Egypt, the priests had special status, and they received money by Pharaoh, so they have money to pay for the grain. So then, fast forward a few hundred years, when they made it into the Promised Land and they built the temple, it was kind of the same thing. The priests were supported by the community, so they received lots of gifts and meat and food and things. So they didn't need the little bit of Omer of barley, right? Which, by the way, barley is not even, well, now I guess it is. Back in the day, barley was not human food. Barley was to feed animals, right? So that's why I never touched the bean and barley soup. You like it?
I love it.
Every time I go to schmoozers, they have bean and barley and something else. I say, what do you want today? Something else. I don't care what it is. If it's tomatoes, if it's carrot, if it's onion, I don't care. Just whatever is not bean and barley. And then I never liked it. And then when I learned that barley was animal food, I said, that's why I don't like it.
But you like beer.
Sorry?
You don't like beer?
I do.
Barley is part of beer,
I know.
not just
But it's in a way that you don't see it. There is also wheat beer, which I like it better.
So the expression is do as I say, not as I do?
Fights in beer.
No, it's just say.
I'm teasing.
I don't like the soup, the barley soup. I don't like it. But it, I don't want to start a debate about. Not the. Okay, so let's go back now. Remember that I told you. Remember that I told you that the controversy of the word Shabbat,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
After the Shabbat.
Which Shabbat? Yeah.
So is Shabbat the Yom Tov, or Shabbat is the Shabbat, the seventh day? And surprise, surprise, if you read the Torah, could be both. So I wanted to show you a few examples how the word Shabbat could be used to define something that is not Shabbat. Okay, so the first one, we already read about it. He shall elevate the Omer before God for acceptance on your behalf. The priest shall elevate it on the day after the Shabbat. Okay, the Omer. You present it the day after Shabbat. And then read a little bit after that. It said, you must count until the day after the 7th week, 50 days. Then you shall bring in an offering the new grain of God. Okay, so in other words, it's Admi Mochorat Shabbat Shivit in Hebrew. It said you have to count until the day after the Shabbat on the 7th week. That's what the Hebrew is saying. But again, that's what the discrepancy between the rabbis and the Karaites. If it's Shabbat, it's the 7th week, you finish on a Sunday, right? But the rabbis understand it differently. So how can the rabbis justify that the word Shabbat could be understood as something that is not the 7th day of the week? This is the proof. For example, let me read this one. It said, speak to the Israelite people, thus in the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you shall observe a complete rest, a sacred occasion commemorated with loud blasts.
Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah. But how is it said in Hebrew? It said Shabbaton Zichron Truah. So in that case, don't tell me that it's Shabbat.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's also Shabbaton. It's the same root, okay? Because it's referred as to the day of rest. So the festivals could also be called Shabbat because they are a day of rest. So yes, could be confusing, but then if you understand the context of where you're reading, like what the rabbi think that they were doing when they decided that this, in the context of the Omer, the Shabbat is Pesach, you have a justification for that. Look at the next one. Leviticus 23:32, it said, it should be a Shabbat of complete rest for you, and you should practice self-denial on the 9th day of the month at evening. From evening to evening, you should observe this your Shabbat. What is he talking about there?
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. How is it called Yom Kippur? Shabbat Shabbaton.
Shabbat Shabbaton.
So it's also called Shabbat. It's also called Shabbat. So
As it says, Shabbat Shabbaton.
the rabbis got here a point that it may be, and they have a solid now argument for saying that we should count the Omer the day after Pesach. Okay? And I will tell you something else. That is, I love explaining this. Because when I said, okay, the day after Pesach, but how do you know which day of Pesach?
Days.
Is it?
It is.
How long is Pesach?
7 days.
No.
Seven in
Eight.
Israel.
No.
eight
Wait,
here.
do you mean
No.
like when they did
No.
Hallel and they
Nine.
did Pesach at the temple? So it
How
was
many?
only,
How many days?
it was one day with shifts. They had to have multiple shifts of everyone doing their sacrifice.
Pesach is one day.
Yes, but there were so many people doing their sacrifice that when you look,
Nope.
well, that's not what the Talmud says. It says
Pesach
multiple-
is one day.
I wish.
The whole week is called Chag HaMatzot, which is not Pesach. Because Pesach is just the sacrifice of the Paschal lamb.
Right.
That is all what is Pesach.
Easter.
So basically, when it says the day after the Shabbat, it means the day after the sacrifice of the Paschal lamb. If you go to the Siddur, when you say Kiddush for Pesach, you said Et Yom Chag HaMatzot Hazeh. You don't say Chag HaPesach. You say Chag HaMatzot.
Yeah, because we don't sacrifice in the temple anymore and do Hallel there.
No, because the rabbi didn't want to change it from the first night to the rest. So the Chag HaMatzot and Pesach overlap for the first day. And then Chag HaMatzot continues and Pesach is over. So this is something, and this day people forgot. I forgot. You know when I remember that? Many years ago, we have an interfaith seder here, and we have a minister from a church that he offered a blessing to everybody there, and he was telling the story of his church that they decided to embrace the Jewish holidays, okay, and they observed what he called the sacred times of the Lord, and he went to list it, and he listed separately Pesach and Chag HaMatzot, and he was explaining that it's a different holiday. I said, yeah, it is, but I learned it so long in seminary that I totally forgot. We usually think that it's the same, but it's not. So when it says the day after Pesach, that's why you would say, which day of Pesach? No, there is only one day of Pesach.
That's right.
The rest is Chag
Even
HaMatzot.
the greeting now in Israel is Simcha Hagamazot.
Chag HaMatzot.
It's not
So today-
Hagamazot anymore.
Today is not Pesach,
Yeah, that's right.
it's Chag HaMatzot,
Hagamazot.
okay? So when somebody says, do you mean Rabbi Pesach is over?
I forgot. Yeah.
Yeah, but Chag HaMatzot is not. So we continue eating the matzah.
And isn't that the last day a special day, the last 2 days of Passover?
Yeah, it is.
But
Seventh night.
because it's the end of Chag HaMatzot, but it's not Pesach.
Oh,
The end of Chag HaMatzot, the last day of Chag HaMatzot is also festival.
Are we supposed to stay up all night or something? Are we?
No, that is Shavuot.
No, Hagamazot.
There is one?
Seventh night,
Okay.
I think.
Not me.
you have to have a meal like the first
Yeah,
day.
That's
Not
right.
me. Okay, so let's continue here. Okay, the last one that I want to show you about Shabbat.
The Chabad thing.
Mark on the 15th
It's not a thing.
day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the yield of your land, you shall observe a festival of God, last 7 days, a complete rest, complete date on the first day, and a complete rest on the 8th day. And here is talking about how how you call it? Of Chag Matzot, but you see, it says, Yom Arishon Shabbaton, Yom Hashmini Shabbaton. So the first day is Shabbat, the last day is Shabbat. So that's why we count it like this. Okay, let's move on.
Pick you up in the car.
Okay. You can't watch and you can drive and put a video, right?
Hands free.
Okay.
You're not gonna walk.
Just
Listen to you.
the ticket will be brutal, I think. They caught me once. Have you ever been caught with a phone in the car? And I went to fight it because I was in a red light and I was changing. I have my phone and I played radio from there and I was changing the station.
Sure.
Ticket.
How much?
Doesn't matter. But I went to fight it and then they cut it in half and I didn't get the merits. But basically, I was fighting because I said, what is the difference between changing the physical station on the radio on a red light, that you can do that, or doing it from the phone? I was arguing that it was the same. But there's no difference. So anyway. No, you're not allowed to do that.
The devil's in the details.
Yes. Okay, so we count 49 days between Pesach and Shavuot. Okay, we say a blessing for every day of the count, because every day is special and every day is a mitzvah. Every day in between is a mitzvah. Now, listen to this because this is interesting. The rabbis noticed that, okay, let's say if we count the days between Pesach and Shavuot because we are excited that we are going to receive the Torah. Have you ever been excited about something and then you count days? Right? But the way we count days is usually through a countdown. Right? Oh, I'm going on a holiday in 50 days. I'm going on a holiday in 49 days. I'm going on a holiday on 48 days. Right? Or I went once to a house of friends of ours that the guy was counting days for retirement. And he bought a magnet for the fridge that has, I guess, a battery in the back. That you put there how many years, months, and days until retirement, and it will count down how many days to retirement. But it's always a countdown. Look, when we launch a rocket, it's a countdown. But the Omer is a count up. So there was always a question, why, if humans always do a countdown to something important, for the Omer, we do a count up. And the rabbis explain. Okay, the reason that we count from the beginning of the Omer, so many days have passed in your counting, rather than counting how many days remain, shows our great desire to reach the time of Shavuot. Therefore, we do not want to mention at the beginning of our counting how much of our counting such a large number of days that remain until we reach the offering of the 2 loaves on Atzeret. Atzeret is another name of Shavuot. And the 2 loaves is the offering for Shavuot. Look how interesting is this. What do we offer right after Pesach? Sorry? Flour of barley.
Yeah.
Okay? What do we do in Shavuot? 2 loaves of bread made of wheat. Almost like very different from Pesach. Pesach, you're not allowed to eat bread. In Shavuot, you have to eat bread. Keep that in mind. I'm going to address that in a minute. Okay? So, for this rabbi, he will say that the reason why we count day 1, day 2, day 3 is because if you say at the beginning, the giving of the Torah is going to be in 49 days, it's kind of depressing because you are aware of how many days you have to wait. So if you go baby steps, 1, 2, 3, he will say psychologically is different. Okay, that's the explanation here. So we should not find it difficult to understand that once we have passed halfway through the 7 weeks, we do not count down the few days remaining, as one should not change the nature of the counting in the middle. Just in case somebody said, okay, I understand, but after the middle, why don't we go down? So, well, once you started counting up, you keep counting up. Otherwise, it will be confusing. Why do we begin counting from the day after Pesach and not from the first day of Pesach? The answer is that the first day of Pesach is entirely dedicated to remembering the great miracle of the Exodus from Egypt, which is a sign and evidence of the fact that God created the world and of the existence of divine providence. We may not mix something else into that happiness and mention a different idea with it. As such, the counting begins from the second day. And this is very common in Judaism. And let me give you a more mundane or more common example of this principle. Have you ever seen people putting tefillin on a synagogue? When do we put on tefillin?
On Sunday morning and during the week in the morning.
Which days we don't put on tefillin?
On Shabbos.
Shabbat and festival. Why? Because the tefillin is a reminder. But the Shabbat and the festivals are also a reminder for something else, so you don't mix the two. So we don't put on tefillin on Shabbat or festivals because they're already reminding you to something else. So it's the same principle that we have here. Why we don't start counting the Omer the first day of Pesach? Because Pesach already have a different concept. So we don't want to be distracted with this. After Pesach is over, we start something new, which is the counting of the Omer. By the way, what is the Sefirat HaChinuch? It's a practical book containing the 613 commandments. So, if I ask you, which number of mitzvah is counting of the Omer?
306.
There you go.
Is it?
So basically, counting of the Omer is mitzvah 306 out of 613. So this book counts all the mitzvot, so it's easy to study them just one by one. It's like I have a few volumes in my office. There are two books. One is Sefirat HaChinuch, the other one is Sefirat HaMitzvot. They are similar. They're not exactly the same. They both count 613, but there are some differences. Let's continue with this. Now, listen what the Rambam says here. Shavuot is the time of the giving of the Torah. In order to honor and elevate these days, we count the days from previous festival until it arrives, like someone who is waiting for a loved one to arrive, who counts the day by the hours. This is the reason of counting the Omer from the day that we left Egypt until the days of giving of the Torah. And this was the ultimate purpose of leaving Egypt, and I will bring them to me. Remember what Moses was telling Pharaoh. Let my people go, that I will what? Why was Moses saying to Pharaoh that he wanted to take the people out of Egypt?
So we can worship God.
Worship God. So to go, basically, in other words, Moses wanted to take them out to go to the mountain to receive the Torah. That was the plan from the beginning. And Moses was open about it to Pharaoh, even without mentioning the promised land or anything. The goal of the Exodus was going to the mountain to receive the Torah. So that's why it's so important for us that we count the days. And again, the Rambam said we count right away, except that we don't count the first day because it's Pesach and we don't want to be confused or distracted, as Sefirat HaChinuch mentioned on the previous text. That's why we count all these days. Now, the thing that I want to show you here is, again, another explanation of why it's a count up and not a countdown. Listen to this. When a person counts the days towards a certain day, the intervening days have no significance. Let's see if you can understand this. Let's say that you're counting towards retirement, okay? The important day is
The last one.
the last one. Are really the days in between are not important. There are, in fact, the days in between are an obstacle. They're in a way between today and what you want. So the faster they go, the better, because you don't care about the days in between. What you care is about the last day. That's the important one for you. And that's human nature. If you are counting days for your wedding or your birthday, same thing. The important is the last one, not the days in between. Agree?
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so when I lived on kibbutz and that there was a big effort to reclaim Shavuot as when you're actually farming and you're harvesting.
Yes.
So if you're farming, I keep thinking of the song Kfar Charashnu V'gam Zaranu, like they were very conscious of like this day we do this for farming, this day, and we will only get wheat after this many days, and this because we've done the work. We put in the days. And I'm wondering why, when I'm reading this, at what point were the rabbinic scholars so disconnected from the growth of wheat that they're not actually saying you can't count down to the day of harvesting wheat. You have to watch it grow every day, and then when it's ready, you harvest. So it's getting bigger.
Interesting. You're almost there.
Okay, keep going.
You're almost there. That yes, in practical terms, I spoke to farmers about this. They won't follow the development day to day of the growth. They trust that it's going to happen.
Mhm.
Okay, but what I like about your approach, and this is pretty much what I would going to say, is that it doesn't mean that the farmer does not need to have a process to get ready
That's it.
for the ultimate goal.
Because
Because
we go out to the fields every day and say, this is how it's
That's
going
right.
over here, and we have to water and irrigate more over here.
oh, that's for sure. But it's they know that. But it's not that they will sit there to see how it's growing. But there are certain things that they have to do
Yeah.
to make it happen.
Yeah.
Let me back up. Let me bring back the examples that I gave: wedding, birthday, retirement. Well, let's agree that let's talk about wedding, because that usually is the most stressful one, right? What do you have to do before a wedding, for a wedding to happen?
Lots.
A lot of preparation.
Lots. Organized people, they would make a chart, right? With what have to happen, the week before, the month before, the year before, and all that things that you have to do. So again, if you don't prepare yourself, you're not going to enjoy the wedding day, because there were going to be things that they are not done. So there is a preparation. So it's not that the days in between are irrelevant.
No.
If you think that the days in between are irrelevant because it's an impediment between the today and the day that you want to celebrate, then you have a problem. Because you didn't understand how life works. So even though what you want is the end result, you still have to do things in between for the end result to happen.
It's what they say. It's not the destination, it's the journey.
Yeah, and some people don't pay attention along the way. And then when you reach the destination, they realize that they don't have the
Not
correct
ready.
foreign currency,
Yeah.
and they didn't make the research of what time you're supposed to be this, and this country, they have a curfew at 8 p.m. and I didn't know that. Well, you have to do your homework. You travel a lot. You know that sometimes you have to be prepared to know the rules of the country where you go, right? Like if you don't call the synagogue in advance, they won't let you in. Stuff like that. It's like that. So this is for us.
You've been there.
We all been there. Than that. The funniest thing for me was last time that I went to Chile, and they didn't want to let me into the synagogue that I used to be the Chazan there. But security was new people. And then they asked me, do you know anybody inside? I said, well, I used to know the old cantor here. And I said, what's his name? Anibal Mass. Okay, let me ask. And I said, somebody said, yeah, he was a cantor here. Okay, you can come in. Yeah, anyway. For instance, a person who is expected to receive a large gift at the end of 50 days views the day of waiting as 50 days that are interfering with the receipt of the gift. And when a day passes, only 49 days remain that separate him from the gift.
Like this.
But we relate to the days of Sefirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, differently. These days are days of spiritual building. And when a person builds a 10-story building, he counts each story, right? I have built one story. I have built second story, etc. He doesn't say, I have 9 stories left to build. Similarly, on the days of Sefirat HaOmer, we are building and preparing ourselves from Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. God will be prepared to give us the Torah right away, but we are simply not ready yet. Therefore, we count the days of preparation and count the spiritual stories that prepare us for Matan Torah. And that's why it's a count up, because it's a building. When you build something, you build
Brick by brick.
on top
Yeah.
of the previous thing. So that's why we go from 1 to 50 and not from 50 to 1. Now, there is another principle here that you may be familiar with it, that is, we call it the Hanukkah principle. You know, there was a discussion during Hanukkah between Hillel and Shammai. Shammai said that on Hanukkah, we have to start with 8 candles the first night and finish with 1 candle last night. Why do you think, what would be the rationale for that? Start with 8, finish with 1.
Because the oil was
For example,
right.
it was less
Running
oil
low.
every night. But also, it looks like he was mirroring the sacrifices on Sukkot, that they were decreasing sacrifices. But then Hillel said, no, we start with 1, we finish with 8. And then Hillel said something
Increase
That-
the light.
that became a principle in Judaism for everything in life. In the holy matters, we always increase, we never decrease. And from there, the rabbis learned so many different things. For example, it said, and this is something that I learned for Pesach. And do you know that for kosher milk, you have 2 different kosher milks. You have regular kosher milk and Halab Israel. You know what is Halab Israel? It's crazy. It's a kosher milk that it was produced and supervised from beginning to end by a Jew.
Jewish cows.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Right? That is it's like a above and beyond level of kosher. If by any chance you went crazy one day and said, I want to be a Halab Israel kind of guy, and you go and start buying Halab Israel for your diet, there is no difference between the 2 milks. It's just like some people is more, I don't know, because it's produced by a Jew, whatever. Once you are there, you can never go to regular kosher milk. Why? Because in the sacred matter, you will always increase, you never decrease. Ta-da!
But you could just buy a cow.
And some people will say that is the same reason why if you never ate kitniot in Pesach. You know what kitniot is?
Beans
Is
and
the-
rice?
Yeah, they are,
Peas,
how do you say it in English? Leguminosas.
legumes, pulses.
Legumes and
Yeah.
things that they are not chametz, but Ashkenazi rabbis forbid it. So if you're Ashkenazi, you don't eat it on Pesach, like rice and chickpeas and all that. And Sephardim, they do eat it. But said once you decided that you don't eat it, then you cannot start eating it because you always increase, you never decrease.
Or you can say that you married into a Sephardic family and you don't want to have disharmony on the holiday, so everyone gets to eat rice.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
Good luck with that.
We decide what type of Pesach we're having
Now.
every year. We don't-
In order to build up for Sefirat HaOmer, for the counting of the Omer, there are different tools. One tool is to study something every day of the counting of the Omer, and something that is related to building character. Okay? Because remember what I told you at the beginning of the class? That before you engage into studying a holy book, you have to purify your heart. How do you do that? Every day of the counting of the Omer, you have to study something that is oriented to making you a better person. So I'm giving you here an example of the one that I use. or the thing that my app, the one that I was comparing with Michael, the app I use, it gives me a meditation every day. Just a short thing to think about or to discuss on a table or something. I will give you here a few examples. This is for day 19 of the counting of the Omer. Day 19 is called Hod Shebetiferet. Okay? It's because it's a. How many of you studied Kabbalah before? The Tree of Life.
I have.
The Tree of Life has the Sefirot, and they're connected.
It's
And
10.
that doesn't really matter. So this counting of the Omer is very Kabbalistic. Very Kabbalistic. So every day of the Omer will be a connection between different parts of the Tree of Life of Kabbalah. So this day is called Humility in Empathy. Okay? And let's see the meditation for day 19 that this app gives. And this is just random. Genuine empathy requires humility. Hod means surrender, humility and submission. I must listen closely to the other person's needs and wants. Sometimes we become smug and arrogant in our empathy, trying to guide other people's emotions and pathways. We are empathetic on our terms, not on theirs. I must learn to cultivate humility and modesty in my empathy. I need to open myself up to what the other person is feeling, not what I think they should be feeling. Okay? And then it's interesting because you may say, well, I disagree. And that's fine, because that's the whole idea of engaging every day of the Omer with something like this. Either because you like it, and you said, yes, something I can do, or you said, no, I think it should be different. But at least you don't get indifferent every day of the Omer. That's the whole idea. And then you will see, like for day 20 will be another one. I will skip it because you got the idea already on how it works. Okay? Now, and the other thing that I want to show you, I said we start with barley, we finish with 2 loaves of bread. Barley on Pesach, 2 loaves of bread on Shavuot. Listen to this. The Omer on Pesach was from the barley harvest. The offering on Shavuot was of wheat. 2 loaves of bread made of wheat. Barley is mainly food for animals. What did I tell you? Wheat is food for human beings. The Torah hints to us that physical independence by itself still leaves man, from the Torah perspective, on the animal level. The counting of the 49 days signifies a 7-fold refining process and marks our progress to full human status with our acceptance of the Torah at Sinai, 7 weeks after the Exodus. So to the point that at the beginning, we start with barley that we don't even eat, because it's inedible, it's just the flour, right? So it's not for us. 7 weeks after is Shavuot. What do we bring? 2 loaves of bread that now we can eat it. And bread is human food. An animal cannot make bread. Bread has to be made. You need to make the flour, you need to mix the dough, you need to let it leaven, right? And then you can bake it and you can have the bread. I think it's fascinating this, if you analyze it from this point of view. And you start with barley, you finish with bread. And that is the progression from Pesach to Shavuot, the preparation. Right, Danica? Okay. And that's it. And I will say one more thing before we finish, because I was asked here in the chat, okay, that somebody said, David Grossman said, day 33 is Lag BaOmer. Have you ever heard that, Lag BaOmer?
Yes.
Lag means 33 in Hebrew.
Okay.
Okay? I know in English, lag means that it's like slower, right? It's lagging.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with that. It's Lamed Gimel, which is 33. It's the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer, is special. Why is that? Listen to this. It is customary not to get married between Pesach and Shavuot because the student of Rabbi Akiva, one of the biggest scholars in Judaism,
They died in Lag BaOmer.
they died during Pesach and Shavuot. Okay, that is permissible to get engaged. So it is customary not to shave or take a haircut until Lag BaOmer, when they say that the students of Rabbi Akiva stop dying. So it looks like they were dying between Pesach and Shavuot, okay? But after 33 days into the counting of the Omer, at the 33rd day, they stopped dying. So it was during that period. So for the first 33 days, many people don't do lots of things. They don't do weddings, they don't cut their hair. The conservative movement changed that. And they established that it should be from Pesach until Yom HaAtzmaut, the Israeli Independence Day. So it's a shorter period. You don't have to wait the 33 days. That's the way we do it here at Shaarey Zedek for years. But why were the students of Rabbi Akiva dying? That's the question here. Okay? And why this severe punishment happened during the counting of the Omer? Listen what it is. The rabbi said, Rabbi Akiva said to his new students, because the students, Rabbi Akiva died, and then the remnant of the first students plus the new ones created a new group for him to teach. He had a new group of students. So Rabbi Akiva said to his new students, my sons, the first ones only died because they did not look generously toward one another. Pay attention that you do not act like them. What did we say before? What are we doing during the counting of the Omer?
Purifying.
So being religious and being a scholar is not enough.
No.
And that was the mistake of the first set of students of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva actually is blaming himself as well, if you study his life, for that to happen. That their failure was his failure as a teacher. Because they were the greatest scholars of all times, but they said that they were treating each other with disrespect.
Hard-hearted.
With disrespect. So that's why Rabbi Akiva said to the new students, look, that's why they died during the counting of the Omer, as a symbol. Because at the time that they should be becoming better people,
Well,
they were not.
But
Yeah,
didn't they
if
have
you-
plague?
Sorry?
Wasn't it a plague?
There are different theories. One said it was a plague, some others said that it was a battle. That they died fighting. Because it's Mageifa, but it's not clear what a Mageifa means in that context. But the point is, what Rabbi Akiva is saying is, regardless what it was, is the time of the year what it was. That for him as a teacher, that was his reading. Hey, he could be wrong, but his reading was, there is a message here from God for us to learn to treat each other with respect.
well, learning is for service, not for vanity.
Yeah.
Also, if you thought you're better than someone else because they know more,
Yeah.
then
Unless,
because some people say, oh, I'm holier because I know more than you.
yeah,
So
your
that
heart's
you're not,
supposed to be generous, like he
Yeah.
says.
you're not,
Yeah.
if you're thinking that way.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
That ends the class for today. And I hope you're going to join us into counting the Omer. We count it every night here with the daily minyan. Or if you don't count the minyan, there's an app for that.
Or you can get an email, I get an email.
That's
My Omer. It's called My Omer.
the new world.
My Omer. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone at home.
Thank you. You know that when you harvest barley, it's really hard